Throughout Lent, not just in this service, but in several services, we have been following the theme of lament. And tonight we're talking about lament in exile. There's a long history, of course, of exile in the Jewish and Christian traditions, and very closely tied to this is this idea of lament, that we have been displaced in some way. When I was a student at seminary, I took a class in Christian history. I remember almost nothing about that class, except that at one point the professor said, "You know, as a Christian church, we do much better when we are a church in exile." That was a new concept to me. I thought, well, we're building sanctuaries for people who feel like exiles, who can come to us, but to ourselves be in that place of exile, meaning exile from the culture in which we live, from the political systems, the social systems, and the economic systems. You know, we find ourselves outside of those systems, and my first knee-jerk reaction is, well, is that really a good thing? How do we have influence? The thing is, though, that the kingdom of heaven you can think about as this vertical, and it intersects all these systems in which we live. Some are better than others, so we have good, bad, or indifferent, depending on the time in history. It doesn't mean that as kingdom workers that we don't care about those systems and don't want justice for those systems, but they are not of the kingdom. And it's a good thing to remember. Often in Christian history we have forgotten. We come to think things like, you know, the world would be so much better if we Christians were in charge. And we could be doing the kingdom work, but doing it in these worldly systems. And of course, the whole history of Christianity shows us that that's a really bad idea. Again and again, when the church has aligned with various systems of empire or of power, however you want to talk about that, they go down the slippery slope because we humans are really, really attracted to power. It's one of the reasons I believe that Jesus talks about it being very difficult for those who are not on the margins and who are close to the centers of power to get into the kingdom of heaven, because of being so mixed in with these ideas of power, and then we can do all of this good because we are powerful. I think at the heart of these concerns, what we find today in our culture are things like Christian nationalism, where once again, because over 20 centuries we still haven't figured it out, that somehow it is appropriate to align with the powers in this country. And of course that flies in the face of all of the Gospels. Just no question about it, that the kingdom of heaven is a very different thing. So it's why in the Gospel of Thomas, saying 42, Jesus said, "Be passers-by." Short and sweet, so it's one that I remember, and it is this idea we hear in the Gospel of John as well, that we are not of this world, that we are meant not to be entangled in those kinds of systems. That does not mean, by the way, that we don't work for justice as is appropriate, but there's a context in which it's appropriate for us. So for instance, Pastor Dwayne stands and prays silently on the steps of the Capitol, particularly when the legislature is in session. That is holy of the kingdom. And that is something that is somewhat set apart. It's where we intersect between the kingdom work and these systems of power and dominance. Now, I want to read a passage, and I'll end with this, from the letter of Peter. It's 1 Peter. And scholars think that this letter was written at a time after the Jewish war, when the temple had been destroyed in the year 70 and people had been driven out and were literally living in exile. And a community of people have clearly written to the writer of this letter and been concerned about the fact that they are outsiders and that they are exiles and that they have no power, very much like many of the immigrant people that we encounter today. They are in a new society where they are marginalized. And so these concerns are what was raised, and here is Peter's response to them. Peter, an apostle on assignment by Jesus the Messiah, writing to exiles scattered to the four winds. Not one is missing, not one forgotten. Friends, this world is not your home, so don't make yourselves cozy in it. Don't indulge your ego at the expense of your soul. Live an exemplary life in your neighborhood so that your actions will refute their prejudices. It is God's will that by doing good you might cure the ignorance of the fools who think you are a danger to society. Exercise your freedom by serving God, not by breaking the rules. Treat everyone you meet with dignity. Love your spiritual family. Revere God. So roll up your sleeves, get your head in the game. As obedient children, let yourselves be pulled into a way of life shaped by God's life, a life of energy and blazing with holiness.